Hey everybody, Mr. Wallowitz here. I just want to talk quickly about how, in the wake of Shays Rebellion, calls for changes to be made to the Articles of Confederation eventually led to the formation of a brand new government. Here we have the Constitutional Convention. First, a little background to it. So, after failing to stir up support for addressing the problems of the Articles of Confederation, delegates had decided to call for a convention in Philadelphia. The states were invited to send their own delegates to this convention. The convention drew 55 delegates from all states except Rhode Island, which chose not to attend. Most of the delegates were very rich, most were very well educated. So the call for a convention to take place in Philadelphia. At the time, it was not called the Constitutional Convention because the idea was only to change or amend the Articles of Confederation. There had been problems. Shays Rebellion addressed those problems. Um, in it, the farmers in western Massachusetts were rebelling. Massachusetts is calling for federal support. The government can't send it because they can't collect taxes. They can't pay for an army to stand by in Massachusetts. So changes needed to be made. The extent of those changes were not quite known yet, and they were still going down to Philadelphia, where everybody was trying to meet in Philadelphia, only to try to amend the Articles of Confederation. There were no plans to scrap it altogether. Conflict happens. So the first act of this convention, the Constitutional Convention, was electing George Washington as president by a unanimous vote. Divisions occurred between those who wanted to amend the Articles of Confederation and those who wanted to abandon them altogether. And it was very regional. Nearly everyone agreed that a stronger national government was necessary, but some saw no need to start from scratch. Those delegates who were mostly from the northern states, thought that a complete change needs to happen. The articles are too weak. We need a stronger, more centralized government to help govern us as a country. Mostly the delegates from the southern states did not feel that way and felt that simply a change was needed. That we don't need to start from scratch. We need to keep giving the states more power because under Great Britain it wasn't working out for us. So why would it work out now? And um, so the change they felt should be in just amending. Let's tweak the Articles of Confederation. Let's fix it a little bit before we start completely from scratch. And the opposition was then broken up into more factions called Federalists, those who wanted a stronger federal government, and Anti-Federalists, who wanted to keep the power in the states. The convention had been empowered only to amend the Articles of Confederation, and to replace the Articles, the convention would have to overstep its authority, and it did. So in it, they're starting to draft up the various plans for how the government should be structured. Uh, both sides submitted their proposals, but they would work together to try to strike some sort of compromise. This was a full-on negotiation. This wasn't here. This is what I believe. This is what I believe, and we're not going to be able to make this mesh. Eventually, they would work to some sort of compromise, a great compromise, as it turned out. So once it was decided that the Articles of Confederation were going to be replaced, they start to debate for about 4 months about the structure of Congress, the legislative branch. Delegates argued about representation, as larger states favored representation by population, the Virginia Plan, and smaller states argued for equal representation, the New Jersey Plan. A breakthrough is made, and the two sides compromised on a bicameral Congress with one house represented by population and the other represented equally. That's why today we have in Congress, we have the House of Representatives, which is considered the lower house of Congress, where the states are represented by population. The larger population your state has, the more representatives in the House of Representatives you have. The least amount of representatives you can have is one, and I think the most representatives is in California with 54. In the upper house of Congress, we have the Senate, where Population, or the states are represented equally no matter your population. Every state gets 2 senators, and that's why every state is represented by no less than 3 people in Congress. The Three-Fifths Compromise. Once the delegates compromised about how the structure of Congress would be, it was proposed that slave populations should be counted in a state's population. This was done mostly by the southern states, who, knowing that slaves or the enslaved made up large portions of the total people living in their state, that, well, we should count them. It would give us more power in Congress. Slaveholders knew that slaves made up a majority of their state's population, and if slaves were counted, they would increase their influence in making laws. They were more likely to pass laws that were more pro-slavery and deny laws that were going to be anti-slavery. States with no slaves argued that even the people who owned slaves didn't treat them as people and they shouldn't be counted. Another compromise was made that stated that all slaves would be counted as 3/5 of a person when counting population to determine representation, especially in the House of Representatives. While there was a conscious effort to push compromise on slavery, that there would be an equal number of free states and an equal number of slave states so that the Senate was always equal, there was an imbalance of representation in the House of Representatives, where the southern slave states had more representation because of the Three-Fifths Compromise than they would have had on an otherwise free population. So it was here where we have the slave states with more power were able to promote pro-slavery laws and stop any type of action to eliminate slavery. Here we have the introduction to the Constitution, Constitutional Convention. In the weeks that follow, we will get more assignments about the Constitution and how it comes to be and who has what power and where. See everybody soon.